Whether you aspire to see the sights, build commercial empires, lead a spiritual flock, physically conceive a literal flock, or simply survive against the odds, Episode 19 is one for the dreamers. This is the Civilization Battle Royale X, Season 5, Episode 19, Tippu Tip's Tip-Top Tin Pot Pit, and Other Twisted Tales. Hello, my name is Aladar, and this is my first attempt at narrating a CBR episode. I'm also the creator of the single least scientific and most pointless statistical metric the sub has ever seen, X-Lassie. If anyone has any feedback on the narration or X-Lassie, I'm all ears. I've gone for quite a bit of narrative world building here. If that's not your thing, the final paragraph or two of each slide is more straight up, so just bear with it or be prepared to skip around. And please forgive any mistakes. The sub's premier pomologist and comic creator Orange Chrissy's latest creation shows just how rough the Pomo have had it lately. Perhaps their luck will improve this episode. This is a graph of my own making. It shows the activity score of each civ on the y-axis, while on the x-axis we see the total population of each civ. This shows a fairly strong correlation between having a large population and doing a large number of things. Given that settling and taking cities yield significant AS, this is a bit of a chicken and egg graph. We can point and laugh at lazy Pakistan and Teotihuacan, though, and note the impressively active Portugal and Lanfang. Here's the list of the most honorable class of human beings in the world, CBRX Ko-Fi supporters. Shout out Convicted Melon for knowing a good civ when they see one. As one of the main Kipchak enjoyers, I would like to take this opportunity to shine a spotlight on the fact that Tagortak has risen 12 positions in the InfoAddict statistical rankings over the last 2 episodes. In addition, they currently boast the 9th largest military on the cylinder. The fact that this meteoric rise from the ashes has been rewarded by the power rankers with a -1 compared to last week's position is perplexing to me. So there. Also, these guys are better than the Pomo at standing back up after they get ganged up on time and time again. Avo stood atop a pile of dismemberment. His fingers were frozen to the point of uselessness. They scrabbled against dented, ruined steel as he tried fruitlessly to prise open the visor on his mangled helm. On his tongue, blood and sweat mingled with the ash which those insane Bjarmian bowmen lathered themselves in before battle. A boulder from the sky slammed into the main square of Venuskolgar, knocking him from his feet. To the east, hoofbeats. The reinforcements would be too late. Avo had slain dozens, perhaps hundreds of Bjarmians to claim Venuskolgar for Estonia. Would anyone ever even know? Estonia takes Venuskolgar, and Lennart Meri looks last episode's narrator Quantum Botany in the eye and cocks one eyebrow. This should flip, but I think Estonia will hold the city in the long term. Their eastern reinforcements look more than a match for Bjarmia here. Here's Jacques Spex. Appropriately enough, he was a Dutch merchant who undertook trade missions to Tokugawa-era Japan. He also went to Korea, where we find him in this screenshot. Japan looks solid, if unremarkable here. Karim Chin looks tempting, but I wouldn't want to pick a fight with the Itelmen if I were Hideyoshi. Tang, meanwhile, looks devoid of land units, as they often do. They don't exactly seem poised to make use of those cannon up in the north. The constant warring and frequent successes of the last few episodes have left Luo Fangbo with a taste for dopamine and adrenaline. Now, things are quiet, and the great law speaker is bored, so he's taken up racing. He orders the construction of a long, twisty strip of road and names it Sepang. Perhaps, one day, people will be able to create one perfect formula of that newfangled gunpowder stuff, and he'll be able to race a rocket around Sepang, or something. Lanfang infills a little. While they have plenty of boats, rather too many of them are still relying on oars for propulsion. Luo has one of the healthiest treasuries on the cylinder, so I'm not sure why he's still sporting any galleasses at all. Citadels are nothing new, but Taizong just built a new one, and he's so proud of it, he's taken the unprecedented step of actually giving it a name. In a speech from his palace's balcony, the Tang King announces to the masses that this new fortification shall be known as Handan. Handan because he's about to be Handan Gru Crane their asses on a platter. A single voice wafts up from the crowd below. Huh? This innovative citadel combo will make for a great staging post for a future Tang invasion of Green Ukraine. Or it would if Taizong could spare more than a handful of knights, muskets, and cannon for the cause. Do you remember when, back in episode 5, squadrons of Banuba swordsmen came flooding across the outback in a time when most people were still figuring out exactly which shape of rock was best to tie to a stick? The descendants of those swordsmen, thousands of years later, are still wielding the exact same swords as their ineffectual ancestors. That being said, New South Wales isn't doing much better here. Despite their slow progress, Bara could be on the cards for them, as Banuba's potential pool of reinforcements is running low. Here's a tip: get tip-top tin pots and pans for tipper-topper prices at Tippu Tip's Tip-Top Tin Pot Pit. Kal Siwa, infuriated, tears down one of the thousands of flyers for Tippu Tip's Tip-Top Tin Pot Pit that have begun to plaster the city walls of Elem. Not only was the marketing insufferable, the man himself was a war profiteer, capitalizing on the scarcity of copper in the region following the Tlingit assault on Potol and the Teotihuacan commandeering of the southeastern mines. She sighs and looks at the crumpled paper in her left hand. Will the wars never end? This is not news, but things look extremely bad for the Pomo. Spear Thrower Owl, who really takes the throw part of his name to heart, has plumped for an invasion force of thousands of crossbows, and his friend Dave, who has a horse at home. Even then, Dave might just have what it takes to deprive Essie Parish of yet another city. The Ponca are washed, and at their peak they were only ever wannabes. White Eagle knows it. His people are washed wannabes. But they do have a sense of humor. In the smiley-faced city of Wainzude, they begin to produce a new type of bowman. In an admirable display of self-deprecation, White Eagle looks himself in the mirror and dubs his new creation Washabe. Time is short for the Ponca Khan. He has to make jokes while he still can. Tlingit rifles amass around the city of Behepal. Some of them are from the city, and a few drops of Pomo blood yet course in their veins. Not that it matters. The Pomo threaten the glory of Saganang. Their cities must fall to the Tlingit so that broadcast totems may be erected at their hearts. The riflers of Behepal know this, and they feel no emotion as they watch their wayward cousins to the south scramble to defend themselves. The Tlingit have riflemen, their unique za, cuirassiers, and even a few cannon. The Pomo heartlands may not be long for this world. In northeastern Makamo, things look even more immediately dire, even though the Anishinabeg forces are mostly lacking in gunpowder for the time being. Some people have been hot on Guaikuru lately because they knocked the shrimpers around a little. Suddenly it appears the shrimp has a scorpion's tail. A credible force is encircling Katu, while Jaku is in no imminent danger whatsoever from the Guai. Whether Potiguara will reclaim their erstwhile city is unclear. What is clear is that the Guaikuru onslaught has sputtered to a halt. This slide tells two extremely different stories. On the right-hand side, we see an insane fumble. While the initial Chono assault on Karal was indeed devastating, Oyeta has failed to restock his forces at the front, and Capac was on the verge of retaking Caballete. Aspero, meanwhile, was under no pressure whatsoever, and that's not even to mention the naval assault Caral had mounted on Chono's Pacific holdings. On the left-hand side, we see Corral preparing to finally do what they and Chono should have done long ago. Anakena is deep in the red. Prince Hotu Matua doesn't even know. When his brother and chief military advisor Oroi burst into his chambers and tried to tell his prince the terrible news, Hotu didn't even look at him. Instead, he raised an arm, patted Oroi on the crown of his head, before rolling over and snuggling deeper into his myriad blankets. Snooze. 5 minutes, were the only words the never-great leader of Rapa Nui could muster. He was busy dreaming of Uluru. Corral's diplomats have a history of success, almost reaching Tang's levels, so the cession of the unthreatened Espero to the Chono may seem strange. However, inside sources indicate that Capac assembled his finest negotiators and briefed them on the importance of the lands across the sea. "I want an empire," he exclaimed fitfully. "Cede Espero if you must. We must preserve our right to the Isle of Dangu at all costs." Following the war, the Chono still boast quite the fleet. While these ships could have helped in the Pacific theater of the Corral-Chono War, sending them to the colony's aid would have violated the core principles of Chono governance, such as just kinda chillin' and watching the seals in the bay. Smiley face. This slide does show us that Chono has a lot left in the tank if they feel like using it. Cerula looked on in resignation as a Cebuano caravel careened onto the shoreline and into a small fishing hut he had just finished building. It wasn't much, but he had been proud of his hut. He'd even mounted a fish above the front door as a decoration, which he'd named Sammy. Cerula was part of a small group of debtors who, to work off their debts, had been ordered to found a new settlement near to Ternate itself. The official in charge of the expedition had told Cerula that his role was strategically vital in preserving our great sultanate in the face of the northern invaders. Cerula pondered his newfound role as a crucial part of Sultan Babola's strategy. Sammy fell from the shattered doorframe and flopped onto the face of the Cebuano captain. Nice, thought Cerula. Fora Madiahi predictably falls to Cebu. More, Ternate itself has begun to take damage as well, though it will be a couple of turns before Humabon can do more than lob a few rocks at it for the next island over. "Ow!" Sisera exclaimed. "What did you do that for?" As a veteran knight of the Hyksos army, he had been doing his duty and staring across the border at the Ethiopian knights for a good 30 years by now. Everything had been normal until a few days ago, when some of the Ethiopians had started riding towards Sisera and his friends. Perhaps Apophis had signed an open borders treaty, Sisera figured. But then, one of the Ethiopian knights had hit Abdikeba in the shoulder with a long pointy stick thing, like really hard. Poor Abdikeba even bled a little. Now one of the Ethiopians had ridden up to Sisera and hit him in the chest. Luckily, Sisera was wearing his armor to keep mosquitoes away, but it still hurt. Ethiopia has made a modicum of progress into Hyksos lands, but with front lines packed with knights and not much else, this war doesn't seem to be going anywhere fast. Apophis, inexperienced in the art of war, settles the city of Ugarit along the Nile. Moravi is a bit like someone in a film who is hanging off the edge of a cliff by their fingertips. Herero is the antagonist. With every citadel, they stomp on Moravi's fingers, weakening their grip on the African continent. Seeing as Moravi haven't had much to shout about in, well, ever, let's take a moment to appreciate their UU. The Zimba Marauder is a pikeman replacement, and while it's not exactly Kalonga Mazula's ticket back into the game, it does have a really cool model and icon. The Pomo, casting about desperately for anything that might save them, aim to appease their gods by reforming Bole Maru. The Teotihuacan assault on Elem is yielding little fruit thus far, while the Tlingit riflers are making heavy work of it up at Katsibodon. Essie doesn't have melee units in place to flip Potol, but it would be futile even if she did, thanks to Tlingit's naval superiority. Meantime, Tippu Tip takes a trip to Tatem, tries to set up Tippu Tip's Tip-Top Tin Pot Pit Tatem branch. Once again, Oroi burst into the chambers of Hotu Matua. He had to wake his brother, his prince. He had to warn him. But when he opened his mouth, it was not words that came out. Instead, the bloodied tip of a Corallian pike protruded. Then he crumpled to the floor, dead. The Corallian pikeman then approached the luxurious four-poster bed where Hotu Matua lay. He drew a dagger. The prince was smiling in his sleep. He knew nothing of the man who had come to end his life. Hotu was dreaming of Uluru and what could have been. Corral seizes Anakena and reduces Rapa Nui, at long last, to 0 cities. However, the eagle-eyed among you may have noticed the Rapa Nui settler a few islands away to the west. Perhaps this was what Hotu needed to finally settle the Pacific. In a move critics are calling extremely outdated and logistically impractical, Yelu Dashi harkens back to the good old days and hatches a plot against fellow member of the toxic thruple, Demetrius. As a diehard Kipchak fan, I welcome this development with open arms. If nothing else, it means that the extremely frightening-looking Karakitai are not plotting against Togotak, at least for the time being. Essie Parrish is telegraphing her plans re the Tlingit, and has chosen a Reformation belief called Judge and Avenger. While this sounds cool, the ability to purchase certain military buildings and courthouses with faith is unlikely to do much for her in her fight for survival. Hotu Matua's dream ended abruptly. He's awake, properly awake, for the first time in what feels like years. But it's not his magnificent four-poster bed surrounding him, nor is it that interminable alarm clock that wears his brother's face. It's metal, cold steel. At first, he thought he was alone, but on the other side of this strange, beeping room sits a man silhouetted against a giant, bright screen behind him. The man turns his head to look at Hotu. "Am I still dreaming?" asks the Prince of Rapa Nui. "No, you're awake. This is reality. I've been alone here for quite a while." The voice was subdued, sad. "What were you dreaming about before?" The question took Hotu off guard. "Oh, well, I was dreaming about the most amazing thing. There's a huge, magnificent red rock somewhere out there. The first group of settlers I ever had sent back missives about it. I've been captivated by it ever since." He sighed. "I wish I could have seen it while I was still there." "Well, I'd say you have two options. You can take a seat here with me and see your rock on the big screen, or you can jump back in there and go see it for yourself." "Can you do that?" asks Hotu in wonder. "Of course." Hotu's eyes adjusted, and the rotting visage of Sho Shin sharpened into view before him. "I did it myself." All of a sudden, Anishinabe's conquests looked devoid of defenders. With the combination of their UUs, some trebuchets, low city defense scores, and the distracted Anishinaabe forces, Ponca could realistically snag a couple of cities back if they declared war right now. They won't, of course, but they could. Karankawa may have been reduced to a one-city rump, but at least they still have one megaboat. Hotu awoke again. There was no metal, no zombified world leader, no beeping. He was on a seashore, an unfamiliar one. "My prince, what has happened?" A Matatoa warrior stood over him, holding out a hand. Hotu took it and hauled himself to his feet. "Anakena is fallen, but it matters not. I must see the red rock with my own eyes. I must see it while there is still time." The warrior looked around nervously, confused. Very well, my prince. While we work on that, may I have the honor of welcoming you to your newest city, Mataveri." They gestured at the collection of ramshackle buildings dotted along the coastline. Janos Hunyadi, standing aboard a Corallian frigate, looks through a sextant at the pitiful settlement he had been tasked with attacking, for the glory of our overseas empire. He spat. He was better suited for defending his homeland against the onslaughts of invaders. He should have been at Caballete. Instead, he was here. Capac's name escaped his lips as a whispered curse. Despite the Itelmen's scientific comeback as a result of the broken tenets of Saganang, they are still sporting a navy composed primarily of triremes. Could money be the issue? Sure, their treasury isn't exactly bursting at the seams, but nor does a singular moth emerge from Harchin's wallet when he opens it. Across the Bering Strait, the Tlingit are busy infilling where they can. For the Tlingit, where they can means only on the coast. That settler is threatening to obliterate the customs house upon which they stand. Also of note is the surprising concentration of Tlingit ships within the Arctic Circle. The birth rate in Pakistan has created significant pressures on the farming and food industries there. A young Pakistani man by the name of Henri Nestle grew up in the metropolis of Lyallpur. His family home was near the southern gate, and as a boy he watched the seemingly infinite stream of grain carts process into the city to support its swelling masses. What if, Henri pondered, what if someone set up bakeries along the farmsteads themselves? Wouldn't it be better, more efficient to produce the final product on site and then transport it to the cities of Pakistan? Just a few years later, and Henri has built himself a veritable empire of these bakeries, each one more massive than any bakery anyone had seen before. Now, when he went to his old home in Lyallpur, it was an infinite stream of his baked goods which processed into the city. It was he who nourished the people of Pakistan. Cebu's assault on the city of Ternate is progressing well. The Ternate themselves are putting up remarkably little of a fight. It's not like they couldn't do more if they wanted. They've got some pretty serious ships further south. But it seems that the capital city of his sultanate is of little interest to Balbullah. Maybe he's found better clothes further south. In Foramadiahi, it turns out that the Cebuano captain has a great sense of humor. He had demanded his men find the person whose fish-face prank he had fallen into. Sarula had thought of running, but where would he even run to? So he allowed himself to be found. To his surprise, the captain, roaring with laughter, clapped Sarula on the back and appointed him the governor of the Cebuano Puppet Council, charged with managing the day-to-day of the city. Sammy the fish now sits upon the doorframe, not of Sarula's meager hut, but of the town hall of Foramadiahi. Pontiac, when asked by his advisors what he would like his newest island settlement to be called, was uncertain. When pressed, he sarcastically vented his frustrations. Best town? His advisors, not wanting to test his patience further, nodded and shuffled from the room. The emptiness seen earlier in the southern reaches of Pontiac's episcopal empire is mirrored on the north, at least on land. Luckily for the Anishinaabe, the Tlingit forces are thin on the snow-covered ground as well. If anyone could try to capitalize, it would be Tadodaho of the Onondaga, but we all know that won't happen. He's too busy trying to find a way through the mysterious Black Curtain, north of Saganawadi. In his heart, he knows there are bountiful, verdant expanses on the other side, if only he could get to them. This slide really demonstrates the reversal of fortunes between Potiguara and Guaycuru in the Gua Wars. Potiguara has Katu and semicircled, and they've begun to chip away at its defenses. The Guaycuru forces have mostly perished, and now much of what remains to defend the north is siege machinery. It's funny, when Potiguara was the favorite in this fight, Guaycuru emerged victorious. Now the tables are turned, and Guaycuru is in the ascendancy. It is the shrimpers of Potiguara who have built an advantage. Zavante, on the back of their most active episode of the season so far, where they registered a whopping 18 activity score, could press their advantage and use the retaken city of Wadeze to mount an assault on the sparsely defended Guaycuru capital. But they won't. Capac knows three things beyond all doubt. His overseas settlements are where the game will be won or lost. that it's very important to go into the aesthetics social policy tree in a domination game, and that it's vital he maximizes his culture output so that he can get to the bottom of the aesthetics tree faster. If he gets enough culture, maybe he can invest in the patronage tree too. With these three certainties in mind, Capac orders the construction of Uffizi in his Papuan holdings at Hanga Pico. This wonder is not very useful at all in the CBRX. It scores a 3 of 10, which means he only gets +4 activity score towards lowering his X-Lassie. Oh man, that's rough, buddy. Not only has Main been citadeled down to just 9 total tiles, 3 of which are out of workable range, both Estonia and Ethiopia have declared war on them. This doesn't mean much yet, but it might be a sign that a coalition is brewing. If Sumer and/or Phoenicia jump on that, it could be curtains for Wakahil Sadiq. Over in the west, the Ethiopians are making glacial progress against the baffled forces of Hyksos. A peace deal with Lan Fang allows us a look at the cylinder's other squeeze toy, Pegu. One advantage of your mid-neighbors stealing your land is that your strong neighbor has a narrower route of attack. The logistical difficulties inherent in any attempt to invade Dagon by the one-tile-wide path available have rendered this conflict an inadequate source of adrenaline and dopamine for law speaker Luo Fangbo. Thus, he has called the whole thing off. Any gunpowder near the Pegu front is to be sent to Sepang, where Luo has found a couple of like-minded scientists willing to strap small rockets to horses. The Banuba have got pretty good fundamentals. They've got solid tech, they're routinely one of the least lazy civs on the cylinder, and they settle reasonably well. Unfortunately, Jandamara is one of the worst military strategists around. Look at that assault on Jijidu. The man may as well be loading his crossbowmen into trebuchets and launching them into the city walls. Meanwhile, the defense force of Darlan Gunaya consists of a trebuchet, and essentially nothing else. With those crossbows in the west, Jandamara would stand a chance of defending Darlan Gunaya, and perhaps that trebuchet could be useful in an assault of Jijidu. Alas, his incompetence knows no bounds. Still, New South Wales are splitting their assault between two cities here, so perhaps the Banuba will emerge unscathed after all. A few thousand kilometers to the east, and the Banuba are losing a war here too. A compact but effective Chono task force has been granted a break from their strenuous seal-gazing duties to mount a successful targeted assault on Karnanki. The open warfare in the Pacific has scuppered Hotu's planned pilgrimage to Uluru thus far. Hearing of his plans, Jacob Marenga is inexplicably infuriated and declares war, swearing that Hotu Matua will not see the Red Rock as long as he lives. A few weeks ago, Apophis had received word from the Ethiopian front. A noble knight by the name of Sisera had come to his court in Avaris and spoke of the shocking brutality of the Ethiopians. By the time Sisera removed his shoulder plating to show Apophis his bruise, Apophis was already apoplectic with rage. How dare they? Sisera spoke of an Ethiopian knight making a knight of Hyksos bleed real blood. What animals, what barbarism had overtaken this beautiful, peaceful world of Almighty Atum's creation? Galvanized, infuriated, Apophis screamed out for vengeance. It mattered not against whom. The whole world must pay for the unspeakable crimes of the knights of Ethiopia. The Phoenician ambassador made to scurry quietly from the throne room. He was seized and put to death on the spot. The whole world must pay. The next day, the Ores-born military advisor to Apophis quietly made peace with the Ethiopians. It was not a good thing to fight on two fronts. She was sure that Apophis wouldn't notice. The Hyksos and the Ores declare war on Phoenicia. Just glancing at the Mediterranean here shows that Phoenicia could be in some real trouble. Meanwhile, Ethiopia and the Hyksos make peace. It would have been difficult for Ethiopia to get much out of this war, and peace seems like a sensible choice. However, it does rather feel as though a stalemate all but guarantees that these two middle powers of Africa will never be truly relevant. Rock band The Velvet Underground made their name in Tlingit lands, but they wanted to spread their sound as far and wide as they could. Someone had told them about a glorious red rock of incomprehensible size in New South Wales. They had decided to seek it out. It sounded like a great place for a concert. Deep down, the soldiers of Onondaga feel that they should have spawned on the Eurasian steppe. They could have fit right in with the Kipchaks, Karakitai, and the Roran. Instead, they are a North American outlier, an army of mounted knights in a world of gunpowder and archery. Worth noting that the eponymous capital city of Onondaga has a shockingly low 9 population. This may fall even further, as the new infill settlement of Sahawi has further reduced the capital's workable tile count. Forces loyal to Balbula had conducted a surprise assault on Foramadiahi. There they found a Ternatan man by the name of Sirula administering the settlement on behalf of the invaders, and traitors are not tolerated. When the Cebuano captain came to check on Sirula's progress, he was welcomed instead by soldiers of Ternate. They were light work, but when he sought out Sirula at the town hall for an explanation, he saw the man's headless body strewn across the steps. But he wasn't headless, not quite. Where Sirula's head had been, there was, instead, the head of a fish, a familiar fish. Dread flooded his veins with icy blood, and the captain raised his eyes toward the top of the city's hall's doorframe. What he saw there meant that he would never rest until the forces of Balbula had been banished from the cylinder, once and for all. The Cebuano recapture the flipped Foramadiahi, while they ramp up the pressure on the Ternatian capital. Humabon demonstrates his extreme competence once more, and Balbula is on his knees. Israel Putnam feels that he simply must conquer the Levant. He's not exactly sure why, but he's been trying to convince Ismail Berzeg to initiate a fresh attack on the Phoenicians for years. Now his time has finally come. Maybe they'll even name a small town after him or something. The core of Phoenicia is now in extreme danger. Naval attacks from the Hyksos, combined with a land invasion by the Circassians, seem to spell naught but doom for Hiram, even if Ismail has been a little slow in getting his forces to the border. Yanomami is another Civ who posted their most active episode yet in episode 18. Here in episode 19, they're trying to keep up that momentum by infilling where they can. After a scare at the hands of Zaragua and the Portuguese, it looks like Davi Kopanawa will be able to maintain his borders after all. Spear thrower Owl's mate Dave had to pick up his kids from Mesoamerican ballgame practice, so he went home. This forced the Teotihuacan military policymakers to come up with a plan B: 2 melee units. With Tatem at half health, this revolutionary approach seems to be paying dividends. Tippu Tip has been forced to take refuge inside a citadel after a coalition of Pomo basket weavers stormed Tippu Tip's tip-top tin pot pit in Tatem. His metal containers were a threat to their proud industry, and his relentless profiteering and infuriating marketing had left him with few willing to defend him. As expected, things are looking yet grimmer for Pomo. If you squint at the very top of the slide, you can see that the Tlingit have frustrated Anishinabeg ambitions by taking the Pomo city of Makamo. Shakes I loves a wonder. While he tends to be smarter about it than Anakauna of the Zaragua, he is not immune to the occasional dud. Haramander Sahib is a 3 of 10 wonder, which grants some faith and culture from merchant specialists. Logan, a New South Welsh pikeman, was about to storm the city of Darlinganaya when he saw a banner flying above the city. It bore news. A burgundy on pink civilization had made peace with an orange on burgundy one. He couldn't believe it. All this effort, and MacArthur bloody goes and makes peace before the final push? Dejected, he shouldered his pike and turned around. It would be a few hours before word spread around camp that the peace had been between Herero and Mysore, but those few hours were enough for the Manuba defenders to regroup before the assault. Just his luck. Darlanganaya, despite the cunning deceit of its citizens, is about to fall. The Banuban crossbow charge on Jijidu has ended in a predictable fashion. As cannonballs fly through the air in the city of Ternate, so do rumors. The besieged Ternateans have taken to telling increasingly tall tales to while away the painful, hunger-filled days. The latest story told of a man with the head of a shark who had liberated the city of Foramadiahi from the Cebuano invaders. Other versions of the story said the head was that of an octopus or a lobster, or that the monstrous hero was actually a Cebuano villain. Ternate falls to the red as Balboa continues to misallocate his military resources to the defense of Foramadiahi rather than his capital. It is only a matter of time before the amphibious Timawa UUs slither their way into the Sultanate's capital. Fyodor Ushakov, much like the Karelian Janos Hunyadi, is cursing the name of his immortal leader. Harchin, in his infinite wisdom, has given Ushakov command of 7 Itelmen triremes, all of which are stuck in the middle of the ocean until such a time as open borders can be agreed upon with Japan. Here is Jandamara proving the point that he's pretty good at everything that isn't military strategy. He makes peace with Marin Oleta of the Chono without giving up any further cities in the deal, despite the Chono's overwhelming military advantage, both in the Pacific theater and overall. For Oleta, Kernanke makes a fine addition to his collection of Pacific Island outposts. Amina of the Zazao surprised many pundits by successfully taking Caruane off the Wasulu last episode. Now she looks to go one better, and knocks forcefully on the door of Bisandugu, the Wasulu capital. Somore Ture may be ejected from the cylinder sooner rather than later. That's fine though. It will give him more time to practice his route tree for the Philadelphia Eagles. Humabon threatened to seize the city of Ternate way back towards the start of the game. Back then, he just had a few triremes, but he came close. Now, after a protracted siege, he has finally claimed the jewel of the Sultanate as his own. He contemplates stopping, consolidating his gains, but his new chief naval commander is insistent. The Ternateans must be crushed. Balboa doesn't need to flee. He had long since abandoned the de jure capital and moved his court to Sidangoli. He is, however, starting to really sweat. Timawa soldiers march over the horizon. The Biarmians, feeling the heat from the Estonian attacks, have developed a new military stratagem. It's called Fortify in Place and Get Shot At. So far, it's a roaring success. Kotla Jarve is scratched, but barely. The Estonian forces seem more likely to march on Vina and Gandvik than to defend their own lands, so it's possible that the Biarmians may push through here by sheer weight of numbers. In the west, Vinaskogar seems to be firmly in Lennart Meri's grasp. A monument to the Estonian heroes who fell taking the city is erected, but no names are inscribed thereupon. The New South Welsh seize Darlanganaya. As punishment for their deceitful tactics, the city's residents are forced to watch their homes burn as MacArthur orders the settlement razed. New South Wales still has a little gas in the tank, but not much. John Damara has pumped out some more defenders for his remaining cities as well. This war will probably be nothing but a meat grinder until its conclusion. Now that the fighting in the region has died down, Uluru is open to tourists again. Excitedly, an envoy of Rapa Nui stationed in the desert town of Sorel pens a letter to tell his prince the good news. But when the letter arrives, there is no prince left to receive it. Hotu Matua of Rapa Nui is eliminated and finishes in 60th position in the CBRX Season 5. He was a leader who dared to dream, and to dream, you need to sleep. So that's exactly what he did for 99% of the game. Rapa Nui will go down as one of the silliest and least effective civs in the history of the CBR. From day one, they were unfocused and insistent on making incomprehensible moves. But that also made them, if not a fan favorite, then a kind of curiosity for people to gawk at. Hotu will spend the rest of this season sitting alongside Shoshin, watching the slides change on the big screen, always hoping that the next will yield him a glimpse of the object of his dreams. The Potiguaran siege of Katu is going every bit as poorly as you might expect of Felipe Camarao's forces. Surprisingly, a two-ship sortie against Laguna Los Pajes is yielding marginally more success. With both ships at half health, it is doomed to fail. If only Felipe had, 12 spare galleasses laying around to help with the mission. Oh well. The Guaycuru seem equally reluctant to commit any ships to this naval skirmish, to the extent that the great Admiral Fuma Kotaro is mounting a defense of Laguna Los Pajes without so much as a dinghy to command. To celebrate the arrival of Hotu Matua aboard the submarine, a golden age is declared. Circassia has a rare opportunity to actually use the modest navy they have built in the Caspian in the form of the Siege of Sarepta. Naturally, Ismail Berzeg orders his sailors to queue behind an embarked swordsman instead. Despite this, the Circassian offensive looks like it should claim Sarepta with relative ease. Berzeg's troops look to be making progress against Phoenicia in the southwest as well. I guess I kind of forgot that was happening news. Dicha and Robespierre make peace. The packed nature of the Mediterranean meant that the Aures never stood much chance of doing serious damage to Bordeaux. For his part, Robespierre has technically dealt with simultaneous invasions on 3 fronts. Exactly how impressive this feat really is, I'll let you all be the judges. Of significance to nobody but myself, I believe this is the first sighting of the singular Kipchak trireme who was forcibly ejected from the Caspian several episodes ago by border expansion. My white whale is slain. Another peace deal in a war with an extremely narrow front comes in, as the Itelmen and the Roran call it quits. I wonder just how many units were sent to their frozen deaths in an attempt to attack Chakajush or Kilush. While the wriggling riders have been rendered obsolete, the Roran are sporting a few nonors in this slide. Surprisingly, the Roran forces here look exactly as outdated as those of Green Ukraine. Amina is making stunningly effective use of her UU, the Yan Lefida, a knight with a reduced combat penalty against cities. Bisandugu is all the way in the red, and Sanankoro is at half. The Zazao force isn't huge, but it's certainly effective. Samore Ture has built 3 settlers in the hopes that Amina will burn down his cities, leaving him room to pull off his patented mitosis maneuver. Perhaps he should have built a few more military units instead. When Balbilla was brought news of the fall of his city, he was furious. "We cannot let these invaders take our most precious lands without a fight. Organize a counterattack now," he barked at his advisors. "Well, we will need more ships, my Sultan." "Ships? Why would we need ships? Build land units." "But, my Sultan, we have nowhere to land our forces near Ternate. There's a Scottish scout who won't budge." "Who said anything about Ternate?" bellowed the Sultan. "Send a relief force to Foramadiahi this instant." The advisors, in unison, sighed. Balbilla had heard the tales of the shark-headed hero of Foramadiahi, and was hell-bent on bringing him to Sidangoli to defend the new Ternatean capital. Cebu has a pretty firm grip on Ternate, though depending on turn order, Balbilla might be able to flip it once. Humabon has begun to put pressure on Sidangoli, showing no signs of letting up. Foramadiahi appears destined to flip for all eternity. Essie Parish has somehow regained control of Potol. It won't last long, but the Pomo population will take any kind of morale-boosting victory they can get at this point. In Kachibadon, Sheikhs I forces are whittling away at the city walls. Tatem is set to fall, or it would be if not for the 2 Pomo longswordsmen holding the line, blocking the passage of the Teotihuacano knights. Once Spear Thrower Owl can sneak one through, the city will be his. Anacauna's queendom is, frankly, a lovely place to live. The cultural arts are flourishing, the grass is green, and the times are peaceful. However, the Zaraguan fleet has dwindled significantly following the abortive attack on the Yanomami. If Anacauna isn't careful, the tranquil atmosphere of her island's paradise may be abruptly torn to pieces at the hands of her neighbors. Pisandugu and Sanankoro fall in sequence, and neither is put to the torch. All of a sudden, Samori Ture is left with one sole refuge, and even that is under serious pressure from the Zazao fleet. Admittedly, there are a couple of swordsmen in place to flip the Wasolo capital, but this land belongs to Amina now. Honestly, she thoroughly deserves it. Now let's contemplate what might happen if she turned the wrath of those Yandefida to the north. The former Ma'in city of Kaminahu is the first target of the newly energized and enraged Apophis. If the city does fall, it will likely turn into a protracted flip fest, which drains the resources of both Phoenicia and the Hyksos. Further north, the Circassians are flooding into Phoenician territory, but they are yet to leave a mark on any of Hiram's cities. Sumer should join in here, even if they have to deal with Seychelles in the south. This is their final chance to salvage even a fraction of relevance. A general actually proposed this to Eonatum. He told the general to read the shirt. Kachibadon falls as a glorious cuirassier charge sweeps through the entire region, vanquishing every Pomo defender left standing. The Tlingit waste no time in setting up a Saganang broadcast totem through which spiritually derived messages can be transmitted back to the capital. The Pomo have settled a new city in the vain hope that their conquerors may not notice. The Tlingit army is at the gates of Kokajal, and Essie Parish can do little but look on in horror as the realm she built to honor the spirits of Bole Maru crumbles around her. Tippu Tip sits in a lake. He notices that with the fall of Kachibadon, this lake is the only way to get from the capital to the city of Katkabnkau. Did somebody say toll bridge? Demetrius of Bactria finds the flattest plot of land he can, and names it after a mountain range. Looking at the state of play here, I fear the Kipchaks have missed their moment. They've slowly been building up a top 10 military on the cylinder in the last few episodes, at least in terms of numbers. The Bactrians had been one of their 2 truly viable targets, but Demetrius had clearly given the order to replenish the Bactrian army as well. Worse still, the Bactrians have researched machinery and the crossbows which come with it. It's fine, though. What I really want Tagartuk to do is punish the hubris of the Scythians, whose lands lie bare of defenders. Amina has decided that she isn't interested in taking a massive diplomatic hit in return for a tiny, irrelevant settlement on the western coast of Africa. So she's magnanimously offered Samori Ture peace. Ture, keen to prolong his life, readily accepts the terms. This has been an enormously successful and potentially game-saving war for Zazao. Don't get me wrong, it will still take a lot of work from here, and Diya could roll over and crush Amina's queendom at any moment, but 2 good cities and a 3rd mid one is nothing to sniff at. It's not like Zazao has any neighbors worth worrying about, apart from Ores. The Wasolo, despite it all, remain optimistic. They've always had more heart than most civs would in their situation. Nothing demonstrates this better than the fact that every single land tile that Samori Ture owns has a settler on it. You never know. Pontiac has had a very active few episodes, and he's decided it's time for a rest. He makes his way down to Tangoyan, his favorite city, and orders his people to build him an enormous, luxuriant pleasure palace. In no time at all, the industrious citizens realize his dream. They call it Versailles. This wonder gets a 6 of 10, not for its +5 to culture, but for its 50% extension to We Love the King Day celebrations. A Bjarmian swordsman standing in the main square of Venuskolger hacks furiously at the monument the Southerners had erected there. Once the job is done and the disgrace stands no more, the Bjarmians build something new in its place. A statue. A statue of a mounted Bjarmian knight crushing a heavily armored fleeing Estonian warrior beneath the hooves of his horse. Coarse runic letters are etched into the Estonian's armor. They spell out the words, Avo the Spineless. Any previous statements to the effect of, it looks like the Estonians have solidified their hold on Venuskolger, were clearly a joke and should have been disregarded as such. The Bjarmian forces around Kohtla-Järve are in reasonable shape, but they are vulnerable to bombardment from 2 frigates, a city, and a crossbowman. Darlingunaya is no more. The New South Welsh army stands atop piles of rubble and ash as they ponder their next move. In Sorel, an envoy from Rapa Nui waits, first patiently, then anxiously, then distraught. If Hotu hasn't replied to the news that Uluru is open to tourists, it can only mean one thing. One day, after months of dwindling hope, the envoy puts down his quill, finds a scythe, and heads out into the fields to work. New South Wales troops are not very well placed here, nor are they plentiful enough to pose any further immediate threat to the Banuba. Joao looks south. Amina has left some food on the table, and breakfast was a while ago. Even the most optimistic citizen of Wasulu's faith in the future is shaken by the Portuguese declaration of war. To be perfectly honest, Kankan is a meager prize, but it's also a much more realistic prospect than the Yanomami cities Joao was angling for earlier. On paper, the Seychellois declaration of war on Zara Yacob of Ethiopia is a perfectly logical step. Ethiopia has some decent cities, multiple wonders, and the Seychelles have certainly outstripped them technologically. However, things may not be quite that simple. Ethiopia is entirely landlocked, and the Seychelles have far more navy than army. What's more, Franz Albert is busy low-key bungling what should be a simple conquest of the Sumerians. Whether these factors will make any difference once the Ethiopian knights and longswords feel the force of a Seychellois musket, only time will tell. Shajar al-Dur was deeply frustrated with her performance as the leader of the Mamluks in CBRX Season 4. She had failed to do much of note, and hers was perhaps the single least memorable showing in the whole season. She wanted a fresh chance to make an impact on the cylinder, so she lobbied on the sub to be allowed to re-enter the fray as a general. The good news is that she was successful. The bad news was that she drew a spot with Teotihuacan, one of the sleepier civs. When, during a strategy meeting, Spear Thrower Owl announced that the invasion of Pomo would be conducted by some guy with a horse, Shajar was appalled. Was she doomed to irrelevance again? No, she couldn't be. She dug in her heels. She took on greater powers and responsibilities from within. Finally, she was trusted to lead the attack on Tatem. When the city fell before her, she released a scream of relief. She had, finally, done something. Tatem falls to Teotihuacan, and it looks like Essie will spend valuable resources flipping it rather than committing to the defense of her capital from the looming specter of Shakes I. Despite the increased infilling opportunities provided by the City Settled Distance mod, civs have still been eager to establish Arctic, and in this case Antarctic, refugees. The Chono settlement of Guafo is the latest such venture. That night must be cursing their luck. Couldn't they have been stationed in a Pacific island colony instead? To be blunt, Cosimo hated it here. He loved nothing more than the arts. He had enormous wealth, and he desperately wanted to commission sculptures, murals, anything, really, so long as it was beautiful. But the Kipchaks didn't have time for beauty. Cultural matters were extremely low on Togortak's list of priorities. What use was a horseman carved from marble when you could invest in the real thing instead. The Bactrians have settled another city at the center of their desert lands, though this one is less ironically named. The Kipchaks, to my chagrin, still lack crossbows. To make matters worse, there's a Scythian musketman on the border. Ugh. The Portuguese navy has forced its way into Cancan, and Samore Ture has fled to the hinterlands. He turns to look back at his last city, torn from his grasp and burning. Wait, burning. There was yet hope. Samore Ture has 3 settlers and 3 swordsmen left to his name. It's not quite over yet, but the chances of him surviving the episode are slim to none. His only hope is to keep at least 1 settler alive and resettle the city as soon as the Portuguese have finished raising it. Can he pull it off? I didn't see the vision before, but I see it now. By declaring war on Ethiopia, Franz Albert has opened up an extra tile or 2 with which he can mount an assault on Manhiat. What a stroke of genius! Manhiat is taken to the yellow, but the Phoenician fleet of caravels is well placed to initiate an interminable flipfest if need be. Over on the Sumerian frontier, the Seychellois are really having a tough time. I like Akhenaten, but he's posed way more problems for the Seychelles than he has any right to. I'm sure we won't take any cities, but it's a bit embarrassing for Franz Albert nonetheless. Much further north, the Hyksos continue to exact retribution on the Ethiopians by throwing themselves rabidly at the Phoenicians. Makes sense. Reports indicate a whale was tossed ashore at Yaguana by a storm. 2 Zaraguans are apparently injured, with one requiring a 2-hour hospital visit. More on this story as it develops. This war has had little effect, other than eviscerating the fleets of both Zaragua and the Yanomami. Theoretically, this leaves the door wide open for Teotihuacan to capitalize. Given Spearthrower Owl's penchant for slumber, such a move will likely remain in the realm of theory. Franz Albert gets in on the ironic city name game, settling Flowery Mountain in Antarctica. He had to range far and wide to find the perfect plot of land for the bit. He doesn't regret it, though I would imagine that Knight does. A group of Tang naval history enthusiasts learned of a group of trapped and obsolete Itelmen triremes and saw an opportunity to stage a grand reenactment of the naval battles of yore. They invited the Cebuano, the masters of trireme warfare, to act as consultants. With their help, they could ensure the utmost historical veracity of their performance. When he was approached for the role of commander of the Itelmen forces, Fyodor Ushakov hurled himself overboard. He was last seen doggy-paddling furiously in the direction of the Itelmen capital. The Pale Brigade has immediately uncovered Essie's secret settlement of Koikal and laid siege to it. Katkam Kao is in the yellow and taking cannon fire. Tatem may flip once and only once more, and Kokajal itself has begun to take damage. Of the Pomo's remaining cities, only Elem is unscathed, for now. Lapu Lapu is a great general. He even has the badge to prove it, which was given to him by Felipe Camarão himself, by the way. But that doesn't make him a good general. In fact, judging by his botched siege of Katu, he's nowhere near. Despite having had their former city mostly encircled for this whole episode, the Potiguarans have made precisely 0 inroads. It's like the whole war has been frozen in time and space for the last 15 turns. Even though they've had ample time to do so, the Guaycuru haven't done much in the way of producing units to defend themselves either. Just pathetic, all round. If, like me, you forgot that this war was even going on, don't worry, we aren't the only ones. Herr Vollenweaver himself appears to have forgotten about it as well. There is little to note about this war. The Wallachian forces have undertaken minor plundering raids into Hanseatic lands. Small skirmishes have taken place between these raiders and the Hansa's patrolling soldiers. Vlad has built a fair few of his Lefegi UU, but his chariots per capita is far too high for the Wallachian army to be considered a genuine threat by anyone. A small delegation of Tang privateers, frigates, pikes, and cannon have been given to the charge of Hong Bao. A messenger from the great Taizong bore him an enigmatic missive. His orders were to see that it is done, whatever that meant. Ever since, Hong Bao has been sailing from port to port, completing side quests in the hopes that one of them is the it he was required to complete. Ternate seems to be running low on melee units with which to foment the destruction of Foramadiahi. The Chono city of Keon is as empty as ever, begging the question, how did Capac not take that in the CC War? Pontiac has been relaxing to the max at his new Palace of Versailles. It's got to the point where senior Anishinaabe military officials have begun to worry about him. He hasn't emerged from the palace in months, and almost nobody has been allowed to see him. Then, word comes from deep within the luxurious halls. Theocrat Pontiac has issued a declaration organizing the Anishinaabe into a theocratic state. When they receive the news, his generals exchange concerned glances. They already were a theocratic state. They had been for hundreds and hundreds of years. What mind-addling substances was their great leader taking in that accursed place? The Anishinaabe declare themselves a theocratic state. They already did this in episode 10 on slide 8. Here we get a better look at the Cebuano-Ternatean conflict. Balbula, previously unconcerned with the fall of his capital, is really shaking in his boots now. Sirangoli, where he had chosen to reside, is under heavy pressure and looks liable to fall in the next couple of turns. Worse yet, his counterattack to reclaim Foramadiahi has bogged down entirely. Word spreads around Cebu that the war is all but won. Prophets, merchants, traders, and migrant workers all flood southwards in droves, hoping to become rich, great, or simply just useful, rebuilding the war-torn Ternatean homeland. I'm a Sumer fan, and even I would never have thought that they had any chance of scratching a Seychellois city, let alone threatening to take one. France Albert's regional navy looks unimpressive and outdated, while Eonatum is making use of a savvy open borders deal with Pakistan to provide naval support to his assault on Eridu. You remember our home in Eridu, honey? The one where we would watch the goat herds at work while we created flocks of our own? Well, no promises, but... The embarrassment of the Seychelles continues as Eridu is besieged by Sumer. The Hyksos have fallen just short of raising the banners of Apophis and Kaminahu. The current placement of units indicates that the Phoenicians may have a small and sorely needed reprieve before they feel the wrath of Apophis once more. The Circassians aren't really playing their part in this war. Initial movements looked promising, and they still have a strong force arrayed across their border with Hiram's territory, but they seem to lack some hunger. They should be threatening Akko by now, but the city is as yet untouched. Melkartpiles built himself a business and a name, controlling the manufacture of Phoenicia's world-famous Tyrian dyes throughout the southern regions. To capitalize upon his success, he released a self-help how-to-get-rich-quick book in which he advocates for brutal backstabbing, scheming, and generally unpleasant behavior. His disciples describe themselves as Melkart-pilled. The 3 Wasulu swordsmen didn't hear no bell. One of them has given their life in the desperate attempt to cling on to Kankan, while another has battled their way into the town center. Samore Ture's tattered banners are hoisted once more. Off the coast, a fleet of Portuguese vessels sit ready to strike. As the freshly raised banner flaps in the wind, the Portuguese captains order their navigators to set course for Kankan. For now, all 3 remaining Wasulu settlers live on. There is still hope. Spartacus has masterminded an upheaval of fortunes at Venus Koger. The Estonians had flipped the city back, but now it rests in Biarmian hands with no Estonian melee units in sight. The nearest is at least 3 turns away. This is disappointing for Estonia. Obviously, expectations for Lennart's band of merry men have not been high, but they are prone to showing isolated sparks of promise. Each and every time, however, these sparks fail to ignite much of anything. Motoori Norinaga is one of many Cebuanos who has sensed opportunity in the Isles of Ternate. A middle-ranking cleric in the Anito spiritual order, Motoori grew tired of the lack of avenues for advancement in Singapala. Occasionally, they would receive delegations from the Ternatean Anito clerical order based in Sirangoli. Part of Motoori's responsibilities had been to receive these delegations, to make sure they were comfortable. He was curious by nature, and he learned much about the worship of the Anito down south. Now, the temporal authorities governing Sirangoli were on their knees. Motoori intended to be the first cleric through the doors when the defenders capitulated. He was the ideal candidate to take charge of the Anito faith in the conquered lands, even if his superiors in Singapala couldn't see it. Sirangoli is in the red, and Timawa is well placed to finish it off next turn. Once it falls, Galela should fall soon after. Humabon might not need another war to finish his food. Tippu had been in Katkam recruiting architects and laborers for his bridge project when the siege began. Almost immediately, he began to plot. The winds were blowing one way only, and he'd be damned if he was going to go out on the losing side. One by one, he disposed of the city's leadership figures. Bit by bit, he made the case for himself to assume control of the defense of Katkam. After some months of scheming and campaigning, Tippu was placed in charge, whereupon he immediately surrendered the city to the Tlingit. He hoped that this act would endear him to Shakes I and the Tlingit leadership. But the Tlingit do not look kindly on betrayal. Tippu was indeed granted a role in the Tlingit plan, that of kindling. And it was so that Katkam was set ablaze. If this burns all the way down, and it looks like it will, the Ponca would be wise to capitalize on the empty space and settle a city or two. Of course, they will do no such thing. Tatem is safely in the possession of Spear Thrower Owl and Shajar al-Dur, who is leading the interim governing council of the city. Kankan has flipped again, and Samori has flipped it back. The Pablometrics on this guy. He's so full of heart, or grit. Honestly, I can't separate the two conceptually. There are still 2 living swordsmen, though, concerningly, he is down to just 1 settler. Portugal doesn't seem to be letting up anytime soon. The first global council of the game will be convened at Kellogg in 5 turns. This is sure to grant us observers key insights into the nuances of the cylinder's geopolitical dynamics, as well as their preferences when it comes to breakfast cereal. For instance, the Ket despise Karakitai. This hatred has driven them to demand the world enact the first ever embargo against them. Additionally, Methodism has been proposed as the world religion, presumably at the behest of the Anishinaabe. Maybe that's why Pontiac felt the need to reaffirm his theocratic credentials. Nearby lies the fallen kingdom of the Viatka. If it wasn't so outdated and sneakily padded with scouts, this carpet would indicate some significant comeback potential. It may still signal an impending upturn in Johann Mishkin's fortunes, given just how barren both the Scythian and Biarmian borderlands are. Tagortak, not a man for subtlety, has ordered a fully armored platoon of knights to perform reconnaissance. Against all odds, they found themselves deep behind Viatkan lines. Of course, these two are not a war, but Tagortak is immensely proud of his subterfuge regardless. Sirangoli raises the white flag of surrender, and a force of Timawa warriors march in. Balbula has managed to flee the scene, but he's clearly not as willing to let Sirangoli fall as he was with his capital. The units still in attendance should manage a flip or two before the curtains close on the Sirangoli theater of war. Speaking of flips, Balbula's mastermind counterattack on the vital strategic outpost of Foramadiahi is about to come to fruition. Honestly, Ternate settling for Ahmadiyyahi in the midst of Cebu's invasion has been disastrous. All it has accomplished is to confuse their AI into throwing unit after unit into the abyss in the name of retaking this useless settlement. This entire portion of the New South Welsh Army appears to be undergoing an existential crisis following their decision to raze Darlangunaya to the ground. That, or they're experiencing analysis paralysis as they come together as a committee to plan their next move. What else could explain their more or less total lack of motion for the last 5 turns? A few, though not enough, units are making a go of it at Yuwa in the west. If the rest of these guys could pull their finger out, another Banuban city ought to fall. A Portuguese knight charges into Cancan. A Wasolo sword clatters to the ground. Joao has retaken Cancan. Samori Ture now only has a swordsman, a settler, and a dream. I don't think it would be fitting to prematurely eulogize a civ that has shown repeatedly that it is willing to fight to the last. A Cebuano Timawa lands upon an unclaimed island. To them, it seems like a perfectly good spot on which to settle a city. As Cebu is forbidden from settling cities other than in the most extreme of circumstances, they rely on the creations of others to expand their empire. That Hotumatua lived so close to this place, and never placed a city there, is perceived by Humabon as a direct slight. Furious, he declares war upon the very memory of Hotumatua. There are 3 things of note occurring on this slide. First, the Seychelles have capitalized upon their cunning strategy of declaring war on Ethiopia so that they may use Zara Yaqob's lands as a staging point to attack Maniat. A queue of Phoenician caravels waits to reclaim the city. Franz Albert has won a battle, but a whole war lies ahead. Second, Eridu is still in the green, and Sumerian overextension into Seychellois lands looks like it may backfire massively. The Seychelles have muskets ready to penetrate the soft desert underbelly of Eonatum's holdings. This can't catch the Sumerian leader by surprise. After all, he knows all there is to know about penetration. Third, the Cebu have been expert city snipers so far this game. That Timawa outside Carnawu has the potential to take this status to a whole new level. The Cebuano forces in Sidongoli have been eliminated. While this setback is only temporary, Motoori Norenaga feels its keen sting as he stands alone on an Isle of Ash. This wasn't the glorious parade through the city streets he had envisaged. Balbula, removed to the relative safety of Soasio, fist pumps the air wildly upon learning that both Sidongoli and Foramadiahi have been retaken, and on the same turn no less. His delirium is such that he neither notices nor cares when one of his advisors brings him the news that Galela has fallen under siege. 2 Guaycuru settlers charged with founding a new Antarctic outpost make landfall on a frozen wasteland. The journey has been long, arduous, and above all, lonely. On the shore, one of them points to a pale blue crab. "Pescado negro," he says, grinning. The other lets a moment pass. Then he bursts out into raucous laughter. Together they are alone, and they have lost their minds as one. Apophis has been inconsolable with rage for years at this point. Ever since he heard of Sisera's mistreatment at the hands of those barbarians to the south, he had hardly slept for anger. With this in mind, it's easy to understand why, when he was brought yet more news of Ismail Berzeg's underperformance in the assault on Phoenicia, he proclaimed that the Circassians too would pay for their crimes. Their leader's unstable mental state has led the Hyksos nobility to turn to the finest diplomat the cylinder has ever seen. No lesser negotiator than Tang Taizong himself could smooth over Apophis' insane tirades and tendency to murder ambassadors in a blind rage. When a Hyksos envoy made the request to Taizong, he replied, "Sure, why not? I'm pretty sure this place can run on autopilot for a while." "What's a pilot?" whispered one court attendant to her neighbor. Taizong's nose had begun to bleed. "Hiram has held Kaminahu, and the Circassians have roundly failed to do much of anything in the north thus far. If either Hyksos or Circassia make a breakthrough, their war will become immediately relevant, an enticing prospect. The moment Taizong left for Hyksos, his most senior bureaucrats sprung into action. Their great leader would expect equally great things from them, they knew. They had to be bold, to take risks. So they organized a risk assessment all hands for next Thursday. Once Thursday rolled around, each bureaucrat came armed with a list of suggestions. War against Yunnan was quickly ruled out. Have you seen Kunming lately? Roran, Cebu, Japan, Karakitai, and even Karakitai were ruled out one by one. All of them ranked highly on their internal risk matrix, rendering them uncountenanceable. Spirits were waning. Lunchtime was soon. A voice piped up from the back. "Let's just declare war on Pegu and get out of here." The proposal was unanimously approved. What an eyesore. What an abomination. An insult, frankly. I'm expected to narrate this? The Zaragwa make peace with Yanomami. The war had been going nowhere, and the Yanomami were ready to settle for a white peace. Anakauna, however, is just too nice for her own good. The Yanomami had gone through so much effort, and at her own instigation, too. They couldn't leave empty-handed. Gonaibo, a city of 23 population and one of only 4 relevant cities in Anakauna's ownership, was given to the Yanomami free of charge. This is shockingly reminiscent of the Zaraguan cession of Mame. But that's not all. Davi Kopanawa received this incredible gift, a massive city contiguous with his territory, complete with the great mosque of Jenne, and gave the directive to burn it all to cinders. Idiots. The lot of them. You know what? I refuse. Koyat, I'm done. I'm not narrating this utter nonsense anymore. What? Last slide? Oh. Well, all right then. Bye.